All right, so hello. This is Sam, and Sam, you worked at IH Bydgoszcz from 2013 to 17, right?
I did, yeah. I was trying to figure that out. Yes.
And you were a teacher and ADOS.
Yep.
So Sam is now a wellbeing coach in an SEN school, as well as a sobriety coach for his new company, Sober Rebellion. And he still teaches a few days a week as an English teacher in an SEN secondary school for students with moderate learning difficulties. So over to you, Sam.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm happy if anyone has any questions about the special educational needs school setting at some point, I'm happy to answer them, because we're in a weird setting where I am. We pretty much are a school built of students that should probably be in mainstream if mainstream could teach them due to resources, etc. There's many different reasons. So I might be able to help some people with that. But yeah, the main reason that I wanted to run this chat is twofold. One is to talk about my reflections on coaching versus teaching and how I think we can all kind of maybe use, hopefully, some of those. And the other one is to talk about addiction, because, you know, it gets a pretty bad name. It's pretty stigmatized in society. And, you know, if my story, which is a very different story to what most people would associate with addiction, can help somebody or stop somebody from making some decisions that I made, then all the better. You know, if it just helps one person, then that's amazing. So yeah, I mean, that's it really. If anyone's got any questions, please throw them in the chat as we go along. I will endeavour to answer them. This is a bit of a talk. Back when I was in Bydgoszcz, just like Mike, I would always be beating myself with a stick to make sure that there was like some kind of activity to do or take away. But this is a little bit of a stream of consciousness. So if I lose my way and go off on some, you know, experimental jazz tangent, I apologize. But that is how my brain works. So we'll see how we go. And yeah, if anyone's got any questions, then let me know. So just to give a bit of background, when I rocked up to Bydgoszcz, I had spent the previous 2 years doing a lot of the kind of like cliche traveling. I'd gone out to Australia and New Zealand, and I'd kind of learnt by that point that, you know, alcohol to me was something that you celebrate with, that you commiserate with, that you socialize with, that you do everything with it. You know, it was like the one-stop shop for, you know, it was the tool that you used for everything. So when I turned up to Bydgoszcz and I was facing teaching for the first time, you know, I was anxious. I mean, I don't know if anyone kind of like connects with that, but my main reason at the beginning, if I'm honest, was to continue traveling, to extend my traveling. And I think that's true for a lot of people in TEFL. And I didn't really know what was waiting for me. So I can remember like rocking up to the train station and Bydgoszcz collected me. And, you know, the truth is, I was looking around and I was like, whoa, you know, this is not the kind of, this train station's a bit different to what I was used to. You know, if anyone's been to Bydgoszcz train station recently, it's a lot more lovely than it used to be. It was quite a daunting building to walk through. Anyway, so G took me to Holska, where I lived in Bydgoszcz, and I was on my own. And, you know, despite having traveled a lot, I think, you know, this comes back to what Mike was saying in the power of L1. Being in a country where I had no idea how to connect with Polish was really daunting. You know, it was like, whoa, I don't know how to judge social situations. I don't know how to go into a shop or do anything. And I think there were these different layers of kind of anxiety going on for me. So I did what any good drinking Brit would do on that first day. I took myself down to the Rynek, drank about 7 or 8 beers, as you do, whatever it was. And, you know, just sort of like forgot about it, put it on the back burner and decided I'd deal with it later, right? But, you know, I think basically this kind of relationship between drinking and anxiety had already been built for me. It was my way of coping with it, really. And I can really remember that first week just loving it. It was just this mixture of just like pure excitement of starting teaching, which I'm sure a lot of us can remember, mixed with the anxiety of just like, whoa, I've got to teach on Monday. And that first Friday, that first party, I can remember just thinking, oh, you know, I can have a few beers, forget about this and just delay what's happening on a Monday. You know, I'm not going to go there. And I can remember driving to Nakło on my first day on a Monday. And just thinking to myself, do I have the power to make this car break down with my mind? Because if I did, I was just going to stop it in its tracks on the road and not go and teach those lessons because of that feeling that I had in my stomach. So I don't know if anyone else resonates with, you know, the anxiety of like beginning a teaching journey, but wherever you start, like I've come to realize, you know, if you start teaching in state schools through PGCE, if you start teaching through TEFL, if you start teaching through some, you know, crazy British Council experience where you don't have anything in your arsenal and you're dropped into some Spanish school because you're on Erasmus or whatever, like it's nuts, you know, it's a real journey of personal development. There's not much else like it other than starting a business, I don't think, because you're, you know, you're on show every day, you've got to turn up for people. And that is, you know, it's an amazing thing, but it also has its, you know, it has its positives and its challenges as well. But, you know, for me, the truth was I ended up in Bydgoszcz, which I am very, very thankful for, because I was surrounded by legends. So, you know, I had, you know, all these amazing people around me and all this amazing support. People like Lisa and Luke, and, you know, if you haven't worked with these people, I'm sure you will have heard about them. And Tim was there when I started, and it was just loads of amazing support. So I was just being given, you know, lessons each day, or not given lessons, but taken through an amazing process of learning from them how to teach, basically. Because let's be honest, when you rock off the back of a seltzer, no one really knows how to teach. You know, you might have had a go. And for me, the only real experience I'd had was I'd been thrown into a 3-week summer school experience. And it was, you hear stories of like cowboy summer schools, but this was as bad as it got. They literally undid a cupboard when I got there and said, this is the English cupboard, right? There was no management. There was nothing. The following year it changed. I think they got their wrist slapped, but I was just like, well, what do I do? So I downloaded some dodgy 1980s textbook for free off of wherever and started teaching. But, you know, it's daunting. It's a challenging thing to do. So, you know, that's a big thing. But, you know, that support was really important to me, and it allowed me to just focus on teaching as the key thing. You know, the only thing I had to worry about was rocking up to the classroom and delivering a really good lesson by my students. And, you know, I was learning how to teach and all of that was happening. But, you know, the TEFL world allows a lot of people, I think, to, you know, you can lie in the morning. You know, you can go out on a Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night, and nobody ever looks at you and thinks that's weird. So you've got this opportunity to be in party mode and also in teaching mode. And I think a lot of us who spend time in TEFL realize that there are a few people that are dealing with things in ways that aren't wholly positive. That was definitely true for me. And, you know, that's how it kind of started. I kind of had this experience of, like I said before, treating anxiety with alcohol, etc. Anyway, fast forward, say, about 4 years to me being ADOS, and things had really changed for me. I had moved from somebody who didn't really know if they wanted to teach to somebody who was truly, truly invested in teaching. You know, the experience I'd had in Bydgoszcz and Torunum was just so amazing in engaging me in the subject, and a real core reflection of me, of TEFL compared to the world of PGCEs and state school teaching, is that if you love a subject, and if you love English, good God, TEFL is a fantastic place to be. Because if you go and try and teach English for the love of the subject in a mainstream school in the UK, you know, you're not going to get to go as deep. You're not going to get to go down the rabbit hole in the same way. You know, there's so much pastoral care and other stuff on the side that, you know, TEFL holds this really amazing place. And it's interesting for me to reflect on that, having left it and not really taught TEFL for a few years now. So anyway, there I am, ADOS. You know, I've really started to enjoy the bits I was really, really falling in love with were the teaching. And you start to realize, you know, what levels do I like teaching? What ages do I like teaching? You know, that was coming to me. But I was really, really loving, and those of you who know me will know how much I love the teacher training, right? I was like running these training sessions. They lit me up. They pushed me out my comfort zone. I thought they were amazing. And more than that, just the ad hoc help in the staff room and doing what I didn't realize at the time was coaching, you know, parts of coaching being that I was realizing off my own back that it was a lot better to just not give somebody a lesson. It was much better to like guide them to a place and let them come up with an idea that was theirs. And even if you thought you had a better idea, ultimately, when they come hop skipping down the stairs because they've had a good lesson or a bad lesson, it's not your good lesson or their bad lesson that you gave to them. It's their win. or it's their failure, which if they very, very quickly learn from, instantly is a win. So, that kind of piece of coaching, and I'm going to come back to that full circle at the end, because I think it's a really important reflection, is really important. And that was great. I was loving that stuff. I was really enjoying it. And at the same time, across those years, I'd kind of realized that actually two things that don't go well together are hangovers and teaching. They do not fit together. And I think a lot of people from the outside in probably didn't know, what the kinds of things that, I would do, like getting home at night and drinking a few cans and, on a normal night, and this is the thing, right? I never missed a lesson. I think I had one day sick in 4. I always turned up to work for people emotionally, right, and physically, but it was taking its toll on me. And I was hiding it, and this is the kind of the truth, is that a lot of people in this world of mental health and addiction, their measure is, well, what's happening in the outside? It's like, how much is that person drinking? What's the thing that's being displayed on the surface? When the truth is, it's your internal relationship with that thing. It's not how much you're doing something. Is why you're doing it, how you're coming to it, what's the impact it's having on your life, right? So I'd realized that, and really Monday mornings, the beer fear on a Monday morning was getting a lot worse. Like, it was the kind of thing where it was like growing, and I think teaching is a real amazing thing to shine a light on things that are important to you, because if you want to turn up and be on point in the classroom, it's really hard to do that if you've had too many beers the night before. And yeah, as I say, there's a lot of people that are going out, and there's a lot of peer pressure around drinking in any world. But I think in TEFL, let's be honest, there's a lot of it too, because a lot of people in party mode. And, I definitely wasn't strong enough to rest on my own kind of healthy boundaries at the time. So, I was getting caught up in all this stuff. I've lost my thing. What was I talking about? Right. So I'd started to have some time away, though. So those of you who know me from Bydgoszcz will know that I was like having a month off here and a month off there, and 2 months off here and 2 months off there, in the aim to kind of get really, really healthy. And I was reading a lot. I'm a big reader, just like you guys. Like, I like to understand why things are happening. So I was reading about drinking. I was like, why is it every time I had 2 months away and come back and try and moderate, I can't do it? What's going on? Like, I'll do this for a day, I'll do this for a week, and then bang, it's like, it's all back again. Like, why is this happening, right? And I think, again, a lot of people think, well, if you can take 2 months off, 6 months off, like, there's nothing going on, right? Because it doesn't fit our story of kind of like a label, something like alcoholic or addict, and to me, these things aren't useful, because they ultimately pretend that there's a world of us and them. There are people that can drink with impunity and no worry, and there are people that can't. We don't have cigarette-aholics. We don't have cocaine-aholics. We just have people who are varying degrees on this spectrum. And this is not to like wreck the party. Like, if alcohol works for people, I think that's amazing. And I'm not the kind of person who's ever going to be like, don't go and hang out with your friends when they drink. I go to festivals and do all of stuff all the time. This is not about making your world smaller. But, there are other options out there that are not the scary, stigmatized, oh my God, am I going to have to go and sit in this room with all these people and admit that I don't have power over something, which to me, wasn't my story as much as it might be for some people. Anyway, I go off on a tangent. So yeah, I mean, that was a big thing. I was pushing myself out of my comfort zone. I was really doing things, standing in front of groups of people. Like, I think a lot of you are going to have this happen, where you like move into like either management or whatever's going on, teacher training, and you're pushing yourself, you're doing amazing things. And, you start to think that like, oh, all of this extra anxiety that is coming from these new things that I'm doing. But what I didn't realize was the amount of it that was coming from alcohol. And yeah, I mean, look, it's very easy to hide in plain sight in TEFL. This is the perfect storm as far as I'm concerned. I wrote a blog post about this a while ago. And, once again, I repeat, this is not about ruining people's party or going and having fun. You guys know me, I'm not about that. But if there are people silently suffering, I wouldn't want anyone to go through what I went through. So, I think it's an important thing to talk about more in this space, definitely. And as I say, it's easy to hide in plain sight. So, yeah, okay. anyone who knew me when they were in Bydgoszcz would have known me, as I say, as being this like, you know, Buddha Sam, who would be like literally doing yoga every day, meditating for 90 minutes in the morning, talking about all this like wacky like yoga stuff and all the rest of it. And then it would like yo-yo from one to the other and I'd be stopping it. So in the end, I kind of was brave enough to make a decision, which was to take a year away from drinking, which was like a huge thing for me. Like I was like, I want to be really brave. I'm going to do something that's every single social event that I could come across. I'm going to tackle this. And that was an amazing experience. So my last 6 months in Poland were that basically was me not drinking, being an ADOS, not drinking. And I don't know if anybody noticed from the outside, but I just felt so different. Like I enjoyed the push. I enjoyed the growth. I enjoyed the, you know, the kind of like all the stuff to do with being an ADOS and being a teacher that before had been really crippling me started to become really, really enjoyable. And I started to have a lot less anxiety. And I started to feel a lot more free. And that kind of 1 year that became an 18-month window, I went to Spain, I did my Delta. I really enjoyed Delta. I'm not going to be, I'll be honest, Delta is not all fun. Like it's mental. No one should ever have to do that amount of work in the 9 weeks or whatever it is. It's off the wall crazy, but I dealt with it in a healthy way, you know, did well, enjoyed it. Me and Luke had a great time in Seville. It was brilliant. I went to India, did the whole thing, you know, traveling and trained to be a yoga teacher and started to like really explore some of these other things that I've been doing. And you know what, it's funny because 18 months later, I came back and I drank again, right? And I think because I now know why, and this is where we're going to come full circle to the coaching piece, is that, you know, I had gone out and I was going out into the big wide world, but there were things that I hadn't faced. So I'd been in India in a culture that it's growing, but doesn't have a huge amount of alcohol around compared to a lot of cultures. You know, I was going into a lot of social situations and talking to people one-on-one or small groups. I still was struggling with the kind of the bigger group thing. I'd made a decision at that time. I'm not going to date. I'm not going to talk to girls or do anything like that because I want a year to myself. But ultimately, like that was going to come at some point. So, you know, when I came back to the UK 18 months later, it was like, oh, there's these things you haven't dealt with. And there's this stuff that you still haven't dealt with. And I kind of realized at that point, whoa, alcohol is not the disease, it's the symptom. There's a lot of stuff going on beneath the surface here that I need to face. And that was my journey into coaching, because I kind of realized I'm going to need to start writing about this. So I started my blog, Unaddicted. That became very cathartic. You know, Sandy loves a good blog, but it's so true. It became my anonymous journal until I was brave enough to put my name on it, to be honest with you. And so that was really important. It allowed me to be authentic and honest with the people around me, my parents, etc., who I hadn't really spoken about this with, truly spoken to them about it. So yeah, it really opened that up for me, the community element. And then I got some coaching around this. And I was like, whoa, what is this coaching thing? You know, they're not telling me what to do. They're just asking me questions. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, I don't know how much I've experienced this before. And I'll finish on that as a final point. But like nowadays, I'm basically working with people with my business, this Sober Rebellion. And it's basically making people realize that, you know, not drinking is a badass choice. It is a subversive choice, you know, as subversive, if not more subversive than drinking, because you're going against the grain. And the stories that we're told are BS, to be perfectly honest with you. It is not true that things are only fun because of alcohol, or that we need alcohol to have fun. Things are inherently fun. And that's the truth of it. But we kind of feel like, well, I know I went out a few nights and didn't enjoy myself that much when I wasn't drinking. And we equate that to mean the same as the opposite, which is alcohol causes fun, right? But we all know, if we sit and really reflect, those of us who do drink, you know, how many bad nights have we had when we've been out drinking? Plenty, right? How many nights has alcohol ruined? Plenty. What's the deciding factor between a good night and a bad night? It's not the booze, it's the people, it's the atmosphere, and it's all of this other stuff that's going on. And when you've grown up in a society that it's just so normal for you to be around alcohol to that degree, it's really hard to see through that BS, actually. It's really hard to get to the truth of it, because so many people never really feel free. So the reason that I'm so passionate about this space is that, you know, I really want to help people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, people who are stopping drinking, actually get free, people that don't resonate with having to do one day at a time, all the time, that there's going to be this endless kind of struggle, because it's not the reality. The science shows that if you go about things in the right way, there's an amazing life to be had, a better life to be had for many, many people, if you move away from whatever the thing is for you. And that could be sugar, that could be caffeine, that could be alcohol, that could be any number of different things, right? It really could be. So how would I connect that to my time in Bydgoszcz? Just to wrap this up then, is that, I think in teaching, we are all told, well, often we're trying to deliver the right answer or a solution to a problem, right? Or we're trying to like show somebody the best way to do something, or the best, this is how we do it. We have our own filters that we bring to the table, just like Mike said, we bring this filter of, I struggled with L1 at school, right? And then as we grow and as we become more conscious, we start to break through those filters, which is really powerful. And that's wisdom, that's the difference between wisdom and knowledge at the end of the day. And I think the one thing we can do from a bird's eye view with teaching is to ask ourselves, when we've got a lesson coming up, where am I doing things that my students could be doing them? So, if you're presenting, if it's PPP and all this kind of stuff, the old school stuff of like, here's the grammar, absorb it, open your brain, pour it in, make it stick. It's like, okay, there's a time and a place for that. But what am I doing that they could be doing? And then we hit this kind of strange space where a lot of teachers and students expect the teacher to be doing all of the work. And the irony is that the more work the students are doing and the more challenge that they have, the more they're learning. So I think that's a really powerful question. Guided discovery, you guys will know these terms, a lot of them. But don't be afraid to like have your students peer teaching each other, like figuring things out together, working through puzzles, having like Mike's saying, non-linguistic challenge, all this amazing stuff that forms this piece of the picture. And I realized that I had a lot of people try to teach me the way to say leave drinking behind. I had a lot of people try to teach me how to find freedom, all these books that were telling me what to do. But ultimately, I had to go out of my own way, learn it for myself, figure this stuff out, coach myself around this picture. And from doing that, then I've basically learned a lot about being a rebel, and what that actually means to me and what it might mean to someone else, which is good fun. And it's interesting coaching in a special educational needs environment as well, because people have different challenges, much different challenges. Yeah, that was it. That was my stream of consciousness. Not much else to say other than answer questions or anything if anyone's got any. Yeah.
Sam, that was amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
You are welcome.
Has anybody got any questions that they'd like to ask Sam?
I will answer anything, by the way. I'm not afraid of any question. Trust me, I've had them all.
Can I just ask that, Sandy, that website that you posted in the chat box, is that Sam's blog?
That's Sam's blog, yeah. Unaddicted, that's right, isn't it, Sam?
Unaddicted, yeah. So that blog there, that's a bit I haven't posted for, I think, probably 6 months, a year now. It became very important to me at one point in my life. And I do go back and read it, and people do as well. I'm building a new site for what I'm doing at the moment that will have, I've started to make a lot more videos. So there is a Sober Rebellion YouTube channel. It's very small. And it's just, I don't believe, again, like this isn't about everyone stopping drinking. It's not going to happen. It's like, well, how do you take your personal power back from it though? Is there an imbalance in your relationship with something that you could regain control of, that if left might become an issue in the future?
Sam, I wanted to ask, you mentioned like teaching and coaching quite a few times. Could you kind of give a definition of what you understand by coaching versus teaching as well?
I think the easiest way to go about it is to define what pure coaching is, and then compare that against something like mentoring and teaching. So in pure coaching, it is completely non-directive. So there is zero advice. There is no assumption that the coach is the expert in the other person's life. So for example, and it sounds like, well, how would I guide someone then? Well, there's a few models that are really powerful, really powerful questions that kind of, you set through a goal, you explore the present moment, and you look and you really bring to light the kind of the beliefs that may be limiting or not for somebody. And then you like kind of break those things open so they see them in a new light. You kind of, I like to think of it as, I felt like I was a jigsaw puzzle and I fell apart, and I was like, right, I need to put myself back together again. but the only bits I could see were in front of me. And there's all this stuff in your subconscious, and there's all these things that are going on that we can't all see because we're human and that's how we work. And it's really great to have somebody going, there's a bit over there that might fit there. There's a bit over there that might fit there. So it's about guiding through questioning, you know, and that's kind of the pure coaching piece, which works for anything really, life coaching, business coaching, educational coaching. And the distinction between that and say mentoring is, I think in mentoring, we assume that somebody has walked the path, that they're kind of like, there's kind of, it's not a status thing, but they might have some advice that they can share. Teaching is kind of in its own little bracket where it's very much, all of those things work in teaching. It's brilliant. It's like, how can, you know, I can't remember what the quote is, Sandy, you might know, but it's something along the lines of, the best teacher is not the person who knows the most, but the person who imparts the most knowledge. So it's like, it's all well and good if you know everything, if you know the entire book, but if you can't help anybody remember any of it, you know. So I think it's all of those things work to the goal of teaching, but I think a lot of people tend to lean on the very old, the kind of old way of like, you know, just memorization. And we all know there's a space for that. There really is. Rote learning is very, very powerful. You know, it's according to all of the research, like if you're going to do times tables, rote learning kicks ass. Like it is the way to do it. But there are other spaces where it's not. So yeah, coaching is just no advice, no assumption that you're the expert. You're an expert in the coaching process, but you're not necessarily an expert in the other person's world.
Has anybody else got any other questions?
Okay, it was a bit of a curveball chat, guys. So you know, it's just kind of like, dude turns up, starts talking about how he's sober now. But yeah, if anyone does have any, or if anyone, and you know, this is so I've been in a SEN setting as well now for 2.5 years. And it's really interesting teaching in that setting. As I say, like I have a mixture of kids with essentially high functioning ASD. So they're on the autistic spectrum, or they are ADHD. Okay. And so it's the wild, it's amazing. It's a really, really interesting place to teach, but you have to become like a king of differentiation. And if there's one thing I can share from what I've learned of TEFL, is that the best type of differentiation that you will ever have in your arsenal, for all the worksheets you can make, all the stuff you can spend hours of your time making and generating, the best thing you can do is ask good questions. That's it. It is your #1 weapon. You've always got it with you. No planning required. Just get better at asking high quality questions. And there's a lot of really good stuff.
Can I ask a quick question, Sam? As someone who's moved back to the UK and was looking at options since the apocalypse, SEM was something I was interested in. Yeah, how useful have you found the tools and communication tools from EFL in like, because that was my kind of hope, I guess, has been that would be transferable.
It's massive, because a lot of the, you know, I think now where you are, Mike, like it's very clear that you're kind of how we're looking at how people learn. It's kind of like at the beginning, I think we all sort of like, it's kind of like accidental teaching a bit. It's like, oh, that was it, they learn, I think. And then you get to a point where you're like, I think I know that they're actually learning. And I think a lot of the barriers that you come across in TEFL really help you to help students to move through barriers as well. Because I mean, many of our students are working with, working memory, for example, is just not there in this, and it's, you know, how we're going to go over capital letters and full stops again and again and again, but we're going to make that interesting and exciting. So it's like, what are you going to do with your games? Like, dude, your games would be on fire in my school. Like, I apologize that I haven't been using more of them. I'm going to dive into your website and make sure that I unleash them on my students. Yeah, like immeasurable. And personally, this is a bit of a secret. Don't tell anybody. But, you know, the training that you received after a year or two in a good school in TEFL, you know, you are in a much better position than you are after 1 year of a PGCE. It's a different ball game. It is a different ball game. They are different ways of teaching. It's great. It is a different thing, though. So if anyone ever wants to reach out and talk about the difference between those two worlds, I'm really happy to talk to them if it's a transition that anyone ever wants to make.
I'm happy to put people in touch if anyone needs that as well.
Yeah, no stress.
Sam, can I ask you another question? So you mentioned asking questions is like the key thing about coaching and about differentiation. Like, where would you recommend people go if they want to learn more about asking questions or about improving the kind of questions they ask?
There is an absolutely amazing document. Where is it? I will see if I can do it. Was given to me. It was about the only thing that I really thought to myself, wow, this is gold. You know, when you're kind of like mining in TEFL and you just collect all this stuff and half of it you never look at because like, wow, it's amazing, it's amazing, it's amazing. You know, this was one thing that I was like, wow, that really stands out. It's a lot to do with, you know, for those of you who know it, Bloom's taxonomy and this kind of, you know, moving up the scale of questioning and what your questioning is doing, you know, because there's a real scale of, you know, open versus closed questions, et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's the biggest thing to do is to understand where your questions fall in something like Bloom's taxonomy, where at the top, it's kind of this creative expression of who we are to be human. Like, when you turn around to a student and say to them, write me a summary, even for a student who's, you know, L1 English, been in that's actually a lot harder than most people realize. Summarizing is a super, super challenging skill because you've got to hold top-down information about the world, bottom-up information about the text. You've got to do all of this kind of like cognitive, like badminton, and then spit it out into something that makes sense in fewer words than what it started. So what you'll find is that I cannot do summary with most of my students in my setting because they're just not there yet. And it's not that we cap anybody, and many of those students may get there later on. But if I'm asking a student, what's a summary, you know, versus a closed question that's asking them to, is it something that might ask them to analyze? And then we go down to the next level where it's like asking them just to remember. We go down. So I think understanding where your questions fall in the scale is powerful, and planning questions into your lesson flow that truly marry up with each stage. That's a big part of it, I think. I will try and dig out that document and send it to you, Sandy, because it's super cool.
Yeah, I'll pass it. If anybody's interested in that, let me know and I can pass it on to you. There's a question in the chat from First Year Teachers Inc., which is a gang of our teachers, but I don't know. Yeah. Which is there something to be said about reducing your alcohol intake rather than aiming for full sobriety?
Here's the truth, right? It's much harder to moderate something than it is to stop it. And that is based on all the science, and like all these things are very triggering. These conversations, like things go off in people's heads. It's like, what? That can't be right. That's a load of rubbish. Blah 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 blah. But if your brain and your body has learned to drink something, for example, or imbibe anything to a certain level, the response of your dopamine and all these different things that are going on in your mind is kind of like set. It will always require some kind of willpower to moderate to a lower level, right? So if you want to reduce your drinking, it's in the understanding and the acceptance that there will be some willpower involved. Now, I work with a lot of people that want to do that and some people that are successful. My honest truth about that is that I got to a point where I was like, I'm not asked. Like, I think it's more fun to like just not drink and learn all the things I want to do to like go out there and be confident. And, you know, it's an endless cycle. So yes, definitely anything that means that you get a bit of your power back over something, that means that you're more in balance, that means that the things that you love in life, you love them more. Of course, there's benefit to that. And I think that's really powerful. But the strange thing is that actually for a lot of people, you know, the long-term journey and realization after years and years of trying to moderate is actually, oh, well, actually, if I just stop, it's easier. Yeah, I don't know if that fully answers the question. It's a really deep one, but that is what came to me. Yeah, good question though. Good question.
Good question. I'm going to pause. I'm going to stop this recording and then I'll start a slightly separate like Q&A specifically about Bydgoszcz, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course.
Or Shah, actually, can you stop the recording? You're in charge of it. Sorry, I seem to have taken over.